Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining us, and welcome to VB in Conversation. I'm joined today by Tom Gillis, Senior Vice President and General Manager of the Security Business Group at Cisco. Tom, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for being here, Tom. So, Tom, now let's jump straight into it. There's a lot of chatter at the moment on, in the security world, and on the security landscape, and there's a lot of chatter about platforms and security platforms. What does that mean for you, and what does that mean for Cisco?
Yeah, I think this is a robust topic. There's been a talk about security platforms in the vendor community for a long time, a long time, like decade more. But all of a sudden, customers are talking about it now, and analysts are talking about it now. And I'll make the argument that the reason is, at the end of the day, all these security controls are to serve one purpose, which is to stop cyber attacks, right? That's what we're spending money on, is how do I prevent myself from being exposed to ransomware? And I think what we see happening is that attackers are getting so good at emulating user behavior and real application behavior that if you're only looking in one domain, so if you're only looking at, for example, email, you may remember I started an email security company. If you're only looking at the endpoint, if you're only looking at NetFlow, you're missing more than half the picture. And so the signal to noise ratio in any one domain is very low. And so the way that we're going to stop modern ransomware attacks and other cyber attacks is to be able to look across multiple domains to correlate. And that is the engine that is driving all the interest in platforms. Now, it has significant implications for the industry. But yeah, I see that really happening out there in a pretty significant way.
Indeed, and in other conversations in this series, we've talked about attackers attacking at machine speed, and defenders defending basically at the speed of their fastest intern in their SOC. And that's something that is not sustainable and hasn't been sustainable. We've seen with the increase in attacks, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I think, as you say, when we're talking about the sheer signal to noise ratio, that can only go up when we're talking about significant moves to the cloud environments or even multi-cloud environments.
Yeah. I think that the name of the game is multi-domain telemetry, right? And so if you look at security efficacy, there's two major drivers that make a security solution effective. There's the data itself, and you can't be relying on summary data, right? We've had systems that use summary data for decades. It's called a SIM. Like, they're widely deployed, and they're sort of useful, but many customers are like, what does this thing do, right? So other than, sort of eat up server capacity. So gathering and aggregating log data, is very expensive. It's very cumbersome. It's hard to do. So I think the whole industry is realizing we got to go beyond summary data like logs, and we've got to we want to look at the data path. I want to see the body of the email. I want to see every click on the website. I want to see every process running on the endpoint and every packet on the wire. And if you have that level of detail, now these attack patterns stick out like a sore thumb. The challenge is that's an awful lot of data. Right, so you can't slurp that up into a big giant log aggregator and save all that. Your SIM bill would be even more. It'd be bigger than the ransomware bill, which I think you could argue maybe it's already approaching that. So we've got to think about a system that can process all this data in near real time, aggregate it, and send it up into some sort of cloud delivered control point. Now, there's a movement afoot to create these open XDR alliances, open XDR frameworks, common data models, and this is all really good stuff. And at Cisco, we put a lot of energy into it. But I still believe that what I call native telemetry, meaning when you're actually sitting in the data path and you can see every mime encoding of the message, every single process running on the endpoint, every single packet on the wire, and put that together, you're going to have a higher fidelity verdict with native telemetry than you would get from any third-party partnerships.
And the increase of multi-cloud, of hybrid cloud environments, that's changed the landscape quite dramatically over the last few years. Yes. I mean, I remember not even that long ago, cloud quite simply meant having a data center.
Yeah.
Now it's a hugely complex environment, multi-cloud, crossing streams of authentication and access and control, et cetera, that's a massively complex thing to engage with.
Yeah, here's what I think is the problem that many customers, especially large customers, are facing, is that they have too many tools in their environment. I meet customers that have 100, 150 different security tools in their tool chain. Now they say, oh, I want to go to, the app team say, I want to put this workload on Amazon. And then another one's like, I'm going to put this on Azure and maybe on Google. Each one of the hyperscalers have their own native tool sets. And it's not that one is better or worse than the other, it's that they're different. And so to the practitioner, this is a disaster that you have all of these tools and they're all being deployed kind of willy-nilly. And yet are we beating the bad guys? Are we more exposed to ransomware or less than we were a year ago, right? And clearly, the evidence is, both the frequency and severity of attacks like ransomware has been increasing steadily. So this tool sprawl is not getting the job done. And I think that, again, comes full circle. It's driving the movement back to a security platform. I want more value out of a smaller number of vendors.
Really, what does resilience mean in a security environment? I mean, can you be secure and not resilient? Can you be resilient? Can you be not resilient but secure? Are they mutually exclusive? Do they have to go hand in hand?
Yeah, in the principle of zero trust, we make the assumption that the attackers are in. And as proud as we are of the efficacy of our solution and this kind of platform approach, it'd be naive to say there's not going to be an event. So what I think is the most interesting definition of security resilience is not just looking at how effectively you catch a cyber attack. It's looking at how can we automate the process to recover from a cyber attack if an event does happen. And I think this is a very, very rich area and something that we're very focused on at Cisco, where we're looking at, can we automate the infrastructure to create a series of forensics that could facilitate the recovery from a ransomware event? Because, I think you've experienced this too. Many of my customers, when they're going through a ransomware attack, the recovery process can take months. And it's an all hands on deck. It's an emergency, like drop everything, let's figuring out the blast radius. How bad is bad? Can take weeks. And I'd say as an industry, we can do much better than that. So automating ransomware recovery, to me, that is security resilience, meaning like, hey, bad things are going to happen. Let's try to minimize the impact and the disruption to the business.
Yeah. So I want to move to the study that you did, which is the cybersecurity readiness index, and I've heard it described as being a wake-up call for the industry. Why is that? What was it that you found that we should be, shaking our CEOs of our organizations and saying, what's going on here? Yeah,
if I use one word to summarize it, I would use the word pessimism. And that right? It's just the fact, right? That many practitioners have been making this gigantic investment, deploying all this tooling. And when you ask them, like, are you more or less secure? The resounding answer is we're less secure. And that's not a good thing, right? But I think, so the wake-up call is, for the most part, the way we've been approaching security is see problem, fix problem, see problem, fix problem, see problem, fix problem. So you have this patchwork of point solutions, and yet, that patchwork is not getting the job done. So it's time to take a step back and say, wait a minute, let's consider a different approach. Now we're coming full circle to the platform discussion, right? I'm going to argue that a platform is far more effective than 8, 10, 15 different point solutions. And it's effective because we share telemetry, right? So we can do analytics across these domains. It's also effective because it's easier to deploy and configure. Most customers have modern security controls deployed. It's the configuration of those tools that is the hard part, right? So the more sophisticated knobs and levers you put in the infrastructure, the more you've got to dial those knobs and levers in the right way to get the result you want, the harder you're making it for yourself. So kind of there's an old adage, complexity is the enemy of security. So trying to build the God box that can manage all the other things, that's not a realistic endeavor. But building a single repository that can understand this telemetry across all these domains, absolutely real, absolutely valuable. Thinking about setting up policy management that can run across multiple systems, absolutely achievable. And that's where I think the benefit of the security platform shows itself. It's easy to manage policy across multiple different things like firewall, VPN, web proxy, and the network itself. Having one policy that can work across all that, that's good, right? You're still going to have device managers, but to have that unified policy layer, that's a very meaningful operational savings, and it can translate into meaningful cost savings as well. So it's better, faster, and cheaper than the individual point solutions. What gets overlooked is the scale and scope of this stuff, because attackers have they have like a whole industry that has verticalized, right? So you can buy a bot, and, you can rent a botnet, you can buy these rootkits as a service, right? So these tools have evolved to the point where the scale and the scope of the attacks is reaching a new level. And here's the way I think about it. I have a friend whose family owns a regional potato chip manufacturing company in Canada. They make potato chips, right? This is not, I mean, for me, potato chips are critical infrastructure, but most of the world is not going to view.
I was going to say.
Yeah. For the ransomware attack, shut down the whole potato chip line. Can you imagine a world without barbecue potato chips? No salt and vinegar. None of that. Shut down because of ransomware. They're not sophisticated IT people. These attacks are everywhere, and it's only growing, right? So I think that's what's fueling the pessimism, is that ransomware is a good business. That's the end of the day. Like the reason we're seeing all this activity is most people are paying the ransom, and so you're going to see more and more and more until we can do things to stop it. That is also what is driving this desire to look at the security platform, because it's a different approach than, sort of piling on yet another point solution and hoping for a different outcome.
So to go back to that 15% of companies that are mature enough to defend against hybrid threats, etc., part of me hopes that 15% is actually the companies that are running the critical national infrastructure, notwithstanding potato chip manufacturers, etc. But I'm hoping that's them. But I would imagine that 85% or a far larger segment of them, these are small to medium enterprises, right? These are not large companies. These are, as you say, potato chip companies, ferry captains, etc., etc. What can they do to maintain any kind of continuity, any kind of resilience in a world like this, in a world where the criminal gangs are hiring people with healthcare plans and vacation plans and have their own HR departments, etc., etc. They're operating more efficiently than we are. So how can these small to medium enterprises actually address these issues?
So I have a little bit of bad news for you, my friend. That your wishful assumption that it's the big enterprises, the banks and whatnot that are prepared. It's not. What we found is that the larger, more established organizations, while they have significant depth of resources, they also have a lot of tech debt, right? So when I go to these banks, I always say it's like I'm at the Computer History Museum, right? So there's a flavor of every form of computer. Look at that, there's a mainframe still running, and those things are running meaningful, real customer data. So the concern ranges from high to low. But to answer your question, like how do we do this? Taking a platform approach is still relatively new in the industry, right? So not a lot of customers have done that. I think that's going to yield something. And then the other really interesting wild card here is the rise of large language models and AI. So when we've been doing AI for decades, like all the way back to my early Ironport days, we were using Bayesian filtering to read, a billion emails and with laser accuracy, this one's spam, this one's not spam, this one's spam, this one's not spam, right? That is an early form of AI. Now, the big deal is that it's only in the past months, right? The past 6 months that we can actually understand and process words and interpret meaning from the words. So that's what these large language models are about. And once you get your head around wait a minute, this isn't just a parlor trick. The computers can now actually understand human language and interpret back human language. It is freaking game changing, right? Like when you start to really think about that, you're like, whoa, what can this do? So here's an example. We have a very large incident response business, and we write up all of the various attack scenarios and how we responded. We've got 20 years worth of data on that. If we feed that into a large language model, we can now create an intelligent assistant that helps that SOC analyst be 10 times more productive than they would otherwise, because the computers understand context. They're going to say, oh, I saw this, this, and this, and that looked like a pattern I saw over here before, and then present that to an analyst. I think some industry people will talk about the computers will replace the humans. My experience in security, that'll never, ever happen, because you have a human on the other end of the wire that's deliberately trying to trick the computer. And if you understand how these computers work and how the AI models work, you can make your stuff cluster with good things, and so it's going to sneak through. So you're always going to have those humans, but we can make them 10 times more productive using AI-powered assistance for doing security analytics, for operating the SOC, responding to events, and formulating policy. Tom, have you ever looked into a firewall and like looked at like the policies in a firewall, like the 5-tuple based firewall? It's gibberish, right? It's assembly code almost, right? It's IP port and protocol, really hard to understand. Let's imagine you could talk to your firewall and say some common sense things like, hey, I want to make sure that the development environment never touches the production environment, and the production environment talks to the internet but never touches to the development environment, right? Like that's 3 lines of English language, but that could be 100,000 firewall rules when you transpose it onto physical infrastructure. AI is going to bridge that gap.
And increasingly more complicated when you talk about virtual infrastructure as well.
Yeah, totally. The other thing that's interesting on the virtual side, and we see this as a very real problem today, is that, as you said, everyone's already on the multi-cloud journey. So most big enterprises have apps that are running out on the public cloud, and then they have assets and apps that are running in their private cloud infrastructure. And where we see an opportunity is the intersection of those two things, because private cloud stuff is all built around IP address as a basis of identity, right? Mm-hmm. And so firewalls speak 5-tuple, which is IP port and protocol. When you go to the public cloud and you use Redshift and Lambda, what's the IP address? There isn't one, right? And so right? So creating a policy manager that can transcend the language of the public cloud, that understands services and the identity of services, and then marry that with the language of the private cloud, which is IP, VLAN and VRF, network constructs. Bringing those together to make secure app-to-app connectivity from private to public or public to private, to make that least privilege, we think that's a really interesting area, and you're going to be seeing a lot more from us in that area.
And certainly when virtual machines and virtual networks and environments and interfaces are being spun up and spun down in seconds in some cases, dependent upon load and usage, et cetera, et cetera. So, trying to keep on top of that with, your Mark I human being is going to be very, very challenging.
Yes.
Brilliant. Tom, thank you so much for your time today. It's been lovely having to have this opportunity to chat with you.
Likewise. Thanks very much, Tom.
And thank you for watching. Remember to check out VentureBeat.com for more stories about the tech revolution, subscribe to our newsletters, and check out our other VB in Conversation videos at VentureBeat.com.